Hello everyone and welcome to episode 20. I'm Gabe and today we'll be heading back to make some progress on a legendary side quest. But first, in the last episode, you finished your battle with Beth, the fighting type head researcher, and had a bunch of your Pokemon evolve. You leave Ordo Outpost and begin trekking through the dense jungles of Route 9 again. With the Poke Ride that you got from Beth, you are able to break through some of the more frustrating barriers along the path and take a more direct route back to the abandoned lab. As you approach the front door, you hear faint cracking coming from your bag. It seems that the 3 eggs that you got from this lab earlier are now hatching. Let's take a look at Professor Ginkgo's initial attempts to revive the starter Pokemons of the Palean region. Now we've got a really fun design concept to play with for these new forms. We're going to be pulling directly from the often less than scientifically accurate dinosaurs of the Jurassic series for these. So if anyone out there is familiar with the Netflix show Camp Cretaceous, our Cactamo line is going to be based on the Ankylosaurus Bumpy. Bumpy also works extremely well as these designs are going to start off looking slightly underdeveloped and a little off, and that's Bumpy's whole thing. She hatched with lopsided horns on her head. And part of being underdeveloped means that these starters are going to be tiny. In fact, I want their proportions to read more like baby Pokemon than starters. Oh, and of course, they're getting new types. I wanted to use Bumpy's nice and vibrant colors, which work well enough for its new typing. And here is our first little ball of cuteness. This is Spliced Cactamo, the 2 cute Pokemon. The DNA from a number of fairy-type Pokemon were used to fill in the gaps of the incomplete Cactamo fossil during the revival process. This variant is too friendly for its own good, and they have difficulty recognizing dangerous situations. They cannot survive alone in the wild. Spliced Cactamo's horns grow in a lopsided manner, which some find off-putting and others find endearing. Its ability is unaware, so that lets it ignore any stat changes. And it's pretty adorable, right? Let's take a look at what Fleetwee's other form will be. Right off the bat, we can say bye-bye to the feathers. In fact, our raptor is going to pull elements from the scene in the original Jurassic Park where Hammond holds the raptor egg as it's hatching. We'll actually leave some of those bits of eggshell on our scrawny little raptor as well. Losing the beak and tweaking the head shape does make this design feel pretty far from the original Fleetwee, but I like where this line is headed, so I'm just going to roll with it. I was initially going to pull the color palette from that hatching Jurassic Raptor, but I ended up landing on these cool purples and blues instead. It leads into the rest of the evolutions better and works with its new typing. And I should have said, all of their new typings are parts of the original's personalities, but they're just more pronounced here. So Cactamo was super cute, and now it's got the fairy typing. And here, Fleetwee's line was incredibly intelligent, so we end up with a psychic type. Alright, here is Spliced Fleetwee, the hatchling Pokemon. The DNA from a number of psychic type Pokemon were used to fill in the gaps of the incomplete Fleetwee fossil during the revival process. This variant is incredibly intelligent, though its tiny body and muscles aren't able to accomplish much yet. Spliced Fleetwee recognize their own defenseless nature and stick on pieces of their eggshells to serve as weak armor. Its ability is Sticky Hold, since it just hatched and it's all sticky, and that prevents items from being taken or switched. It's pretty goofy and kind of ugly in an adorable way, but I'm a fan. Alrighty, let's see what our new Sailil will be. Again, new proportions, so its big head has somehow gotten even bigger. I wanted it to feel like this little Pokemon could throw a tantrum and risk just toppling over due to the size of its head. Inspiration-wise, we're still going to eventually get to the Spinosaurus, but we'll be heading that way by the way of a Baryonyx. Now, A Baryonyx design could very easily still be the water typing, but of course, we need to mix things up. So the original lines were aggressive, and we're going to take that and translate it into the dark type. That also means that with my updated type chart, these new starters will still make a nice triangle. Cactamo's fairy type hits Sailil's dark. That dark hits Fleetwee's psychic type, and though it's a little divisive, Fleetwee's psychic type hits Cactamo's fairy typing. Oh, and little Sailil here will actually start out with its secondary typing. To better illustrate how kind of unstable these spliced forms are, they're going to be getting their original line secondary typing, but they'll all show up at different times. So, the angry little guy actually starts with its dragon typing already. Alright, here is Spliced Sailil, the fussy Pokemon. The DNA from a number of dark-type Pokemon were used to fill in the gaps of the incomplete Sailil fossil during the revival process. This variant is always in a terrible mood. It stomps about in a rage at all times and screams when it does not get what it wants right away. This grumpy Pokemon is incredibly difficult to train and requires constant feeding and praise. Its ability is actually Anger Point, so its attack stat is raised to the max if it's ever hit by a critical attack. And be sure to let me know what you think of these strange and underdeveloped starters down in the comments below. These three adorable Pokemon, they follow you into the abandoned lab where you find Mal still trying to access the computers.
You're back, and it seems that you've hatched the eggs. Very interesting. It seems they've not been able to accurately revive fossils yet when they were working on these three, but they don't have the usual rock-type impurities. From the little bit that I have been able to uncover, it seems that they were able to fill in the missing DNA sequences by using a bunch of other Pokemon species to fill in the gaps. It's certainly not an accurate restoration, but you have to admit that they're quite adorable. Is your Pokedex filled out enough to help me with this? Here, just scan it in.
You scan your Pokedex at the main computer and access is granted. A corrupted program labeled E150 begins to run, but it soon stalls out. It seems that it requires Pokedex entries from a handful of specific Pokemon to complete its task. You have most of the required entries already, but you do see that you'll need each of the fully evolved spliced starters.
The program is so corrupted. It's really hard to tell exactly what this is trying to do. But I hope you're up to the task of helping me figure out what it is. Get me the dex entries for these missing Pokemon. I really feel like we've got something legendary on our hands.
You agree to continue helping Mal and leave them in the abandoned lab to continue your adventure. You look at your little level 1 spliced starters standing in the dark jungles of Route 9 and figure you better level them up somewhere a little bit more appropriate. You call out your trusty Lofteon with the Pokéride and leisurely float back to Route 1. You have a wonderful trek back along the first few routes, letting your little starters slowly get stronger until they are finally ready to evolve. Ah yes, let's go ahead and knock out the second stages. First up, Cactolage. No big surprise here, it just looks even more like Bumpy, and if you know Camp Cretaceous, you know there is nothing wrong with a little bit more baby Bumpy. In fact, I want this design to be as cute as possible, so in the same way that the previous stage was underdeveloped, this design kind of sits in that area between a starter's first and second stage. Also, because it now has so much more Ankylosaurus plating, it's going to get that secondary steel type right away. Colors, just coming from the almighty Bumpy. Oh, and though I am sure you noticed that shiny colors are just the normal starters colors. Alright, here is Spliced Cactolage, the Bumpy Pokemon. For some unknown reason, Spliced Cactolage expresses its steel typing earlier than the completely restored line. Their strong defenses offset the fact that they still view literally everyone and everything as a friend. some of their misplaced DNA must be canine, as they love to play fetch and lick their trainers' faces. And its ability is iron barbs, and that just damages people who attack it. I can definitely see this little guy running around just like a clumsy puppy. Alright, let's see what our psychic type fleetwee becomes. No feathers again, and we've got another adorable reference to use. Baby Blue and Beta are some pretty darn adorable designs from the Jurassic series. Arguably, they are horribly inaccurate. They've just got... they're just tiny versions of the adults with big chunky muzzles and everything, but I digress. It does make for a cute design here. I know that we're definitely treading the that's just a cartoony version of the reference animal territory, but in the end, that's kind of what these spliced forms are about. Luckily, the Jurassic Raptors have this fun blue color palette to work with, which helps it feel more Pokemon-y. Here is Spliced Ovanish, the clever Pokemon. Even after evolving, Spliced Ovanish still lack the distinct feathers of their complete form. Their intelligence continues to grow, and they are able to devise complex plans and coordinate other Pokemon. They are quite mischievous, and trainers must work very hard to keep them out of trouble, but once bonded, they are incredibly loyal. Its ability is Infiltrator, that ignores effects like Reflect, Light Screen, Safeguard, and that's the raptoriness of striking from the sides. I'm also enjoying how, even though this one has almost exactly the same pose and proportions as the original Ovanish, it just feels so different without the feathers. But let's take a look at our Dark Dragon Sliscale. So, this one is a little bit more difficult. The other lines have a baby and adult versions to pull from for inspiration, but we just know that we want this to end up looking like the Jurassic Park 3 Spinosaurus, but how we get there is a little bit more nebulous. So we're going to continue with some of the vague baryonyx inspirations, but I definitely let things be a little looser here. More of that general Pokemon feel. Honestly, it's just more about bridging to the Spinosaurus and building some anticipation for that final design. Alright, here is Spliced Sliscale, the hunched Pokemon. This spliced variant has only the slightest indication of the massive sail that the complete Sliscale sports on its back. These Pokemon continue to be in a perpetually foul mood. Spliced Sliscale are quick to anger and prove to be one of the most difficult Pokemon to train in the Palean region. Its ability is Unnerve, since they're so intimidating, and that makes the foe nervous and unable to eat berries. Alrighty, your new Splice forms are coming along nicely, but they still have a ways to go before we'll get to the final stages. But you're feeling a little bit better about bringing these three with you onto the more difficult routes ahead. You recall a restricted gate labeled with a 6 on the north side of Tri-Town. You use your trusty Pokéride signal to call Loftian to take you there, but we'll pick up from there in the next episode. Thank you all so much for watching, and leave a like if you enjoyed the video. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode down in the comments below. Oh, and a big thank you to Vlogging with Gipster for being Mal. Be sure to check out their channel. I'll link to it below. And I'll see you in episode 21. Bye!